my loves, and welcome back to the Ages of Chaos, and welcome back to this very, very, very extended deep dive into the Emperor's Children release for Warhammer 40,000, the first Emperor's Children release ever, technically. And yeah, I know, go watch the first video where we tackle the sort of half-arsed Emperor's Children releases that were done in 3.5 and second ed and whatnot. They don't count. They do not count, I can tell you. Although I liked a lot of the models, it was perfunctory at best, those releases. This is the first time when there is a dedicated codex, there is a dedicated miniatures range, there's a dedicated army list, etc., etc. And I've got to say, I've been waiting for this since I started the goddamn hobby when I was 8 years old. So this is amazing to me. This is something that I just didn't think would happen, if I'm perfectly honest, up until very, very recently. It's one of those things that seemed almost impossible. But now that it's here, I've got to say I'm very pleased. It's a very interesting release. An experiment, a huge experiment. The miniatures range is it's much more refined than it is even for the other cult legions. There is not much in the Emperor's Children army list, but the way they play is just so interesting. It's all about finesse. It's all about positioning and movement and lining up those charges, those essential assaults with the correct amount of shooting support, and it's so fascinating. I've got in a couple of games with the Emperor's Children against my regular opponents, and yeah, it's a whole new learning curve. If you try to play these guys like previous Chaos armies, even like previous incarnations of the Emperor's Children, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Ostensibly, they're a bit like World Eaters in the sense that they are an assault-based army which is based around movement, but the way that manifests is completely different from the World Eaters, especially in 10th edition, and I've just received their Codex, by the way, and we'll be going over that too. The World Eaters are an armoured fist. You chuck them at the enemy and you murder everything. That's the way they work. The Emperor's Children don't. If you try to play them like that, it just doesn't work. None of the units function in and of themselves. They're not designed to. Everything functions in poetry and support with everything else. And you've got to really think about it. You've got to think about who you're playing against and what the best approach is to that particular force or that particular army. They are very good, the Emperor's Children, at claiming objectives and keeping them. They're very good at it. You will find yourself claiming objectives turn one very, very quickly if you've put together a decent enough army list, if you've got enough in the way of tormentors and infractors and whatnot, which are some of the best units in the Codex, by the way. Those guys love them. I love that. I love the fact that, unlike the other cult legions, their main troop, the Emperor's Children main troop, are not the classic cult unit. The Noise Marines, rather they occupy a different niche. They're more like Havocs. And that's really fascinating. And that's the way you've got to use them. That's the way you've got to use them. The Noise Marines are big, butch, beefy support units. If you chuck them out there on their own, they're going to die. Just as the Tormentors, the Infractors, the Flawless Blades, etc. are going to die. Everything needs to work in tandem. So the Flawless Blades, a lot of people are coming down on the Flawless Blades, and I do think they will probably get a little bit of an update at some point. But the way they're written in the Codex, you need to support them. So something like a Demon Prince on foot, which moves at a comparative speed and buffs their armor piercing. Very, very good. Very, very good support unit. for the flawless blades. And if you commit them along with, say, a unit of noise marines in a rhino or something like that, they'll do the business. Or if you're taking the carnival of excess, commit them with some fiends or some seekers or something like that, and suddenly you're not only getting the benefit of multiple units, but also the buffs from them being in proximity, and that works too. It's really interesting. They are a steep learning curve, and they are not an easy army to play. They're not. They're not designed to be. They're a bit more like the Thousand Sons in that regard. The Death Guard and the World Eaters are much more pick up and play. They're much more readily usable than the Emperor's Children and the Thousand Sons. There's a lot more thought that has to go into these guys. And I love that. I really love that. I think they've captured something very essential about the character of the Emperor's Children in the mechanics of the army list. And I love it's a kind of almost like Ludo narrative as you'd find in video games. I really love it. And it all comes from that Thrill Seekers special rule, which is so good. It's so interesting because it not only is it potentially very powerful, but also it informs the way you play to such a degree that playing Emperor's Children isn't like anything else in the game. It appears very complex when you first read it, and when you first start to play with the Emperor's Children, you're going to make mistakes because the way it's worded, you need to set up charges and shooting and assault in very, very particular orders. But once you've got it, it's actually really cool. Not only is it cool, it's fun. It's actually there's a lot of fun to be had with when it works, when you pull it off. And that's the thing with the Emperor's Children. There's a certain poetry and a lyricism to the army list and the way they play, which I really like. I've got to say, I really, really like it. I wasn't expecting it for some reason. I wasn't expecting them to go down this very niche route where they are so unlike everything else in the game. Nothing plays like these guys. I mean, absolutely nothing. The closest I can think of is something like the Drakari. The Drakari have got a vaguely similar thing going on, but nowhere near to the same degree. They're niche, they're odd. They're an oddball army. That is without a shadow of a doubt, but I love them. I absolutely love them. And in hobby terms, there's nothing. I will never get over this. I love what they've done with the miniatures range. It's so bizarre. The way you have that gradation through the miniatures range of Slaneshi corruption. So you start with the troops, which are the infractors and the tormentors, which are not entirely corrupted yet. They're still very recognizably Space Marines, but there's the hints there of Slaneshi corruption. Then you go through them to the Noise Marines, which are mutated in very particular and strange ways. The Flawless Blades, which are very classically Slanesh Marines with influence from all over older Slanesh miniatures ranges and artwork. You get the characters like the Lords of Excess and the Lord Cacophonist, which are, again, incredibly mutated and blessed by Slanesh. It's a wonderful raid. It really is. I love it to bits. And the potential for conversion work. I mean, my army at the moment, my Emperor's Children army that I'm putting together at present, every miniature's converted. Every single one is unique. And that is the kind of thing all of the cult legions give you. But particularly the Emperor's Children. They give you the potential to just go wild with your imagination. And I love that. Speaking of the miniatures range, oh, wow. I was impressed when they first started hitting. I'm even more impressed having gotten a hold of the sprues. I think they're gorgeous. The Tormentors and the Infractors may be the sleeper hits here. They're very subtle because ostensibly they are Space Marine sprues. They're Chaos Space Marine sprues, but there are very subtle variations and differences. For example, they're much skinnier and lankier, and their proportions are different from other Space Marines and other Chaos Space Marines. They've got this this kind of lankiness to them where they twist and they move in odd ways. Their limbs are longer, they're slightly taller, and the miniatures themselves, when you put them together, they're pivoting at the waist, they're turning like they're dancing or they're striking out, or they're pirouetting. It's really interesting. They have bits of, the Space Marines have this black carapace, which is like a second skin, which links them biologically to their armor. On the Tormentors and the Infractors, parts of it are exposed. You can see it. You can actually see bits of the black carapace. It's so cool. It's so interesting. Alongside that, you have all of this very subtle Slaneshi stuff going on. These curving, almost like water-like shapes all over the armor and in their capes and in their imagery. Love it, love it. There's like a flowing water motif to them, which runs throughout the entire range, which actually makes a lot of sense because water is one of Slanesh's elemental aspects. If you look into the Liber Chaotica, it lists what are the elemental aspects of each of the Chaos powers. Khorne is fire, Tzeentch is air, Nurgle is earth, and Slanesh is water. And that runs throughout the range. So you have, I mean, if you look at the apex of the whole thing, Fulgrim. Fulgrim, last of the, well, not the last of the demon Primarchs, because we've still got Lorgar and Perturabo to go, but the last of the Cult Legion Primarch. And my personal favourite, I've always loved Fulgrim, both in terms of character and just the aesthetics of him. I think he is so beautiful. And he is stunning. I mean, he is absolutely stunning. They've captured that thing, that quintessence of monstrous beauty. Something that is disturbing, but gorgeous. I mean, really aesthetically pleasing to look at. All of the Demon Primarchs have that, by the way. All of them do. But I think Fulgrim, for me, just because of my personal aesthetics, just pips them out. I think he is absolutely beautiful. And I like what they've done. They've taken inspiration from all over the shop, from loads of different portrayals of Fulgrim across the years, in his artwork, in the epic miniatures that existed for him, and then they've added in their own little spins. So the Serpentine tail, which in his Horus Heresy incarnation is very clearly a snake, in the 40k version is more like an eel or some sort of sea leviathan. And again, it makes so much sense given his aspects, He's recalling things like mermaids and selkies and rusalka and the sirens, right? Creatures which have a sort of sexual or erotic element to them. He's recalling that in his aesthetics. It's utterly brilliant. You also have the Clive Barker influence in Fulgrim. That Cenobitic thing with the peeled back flesh and the symbol of Slanesh just welded into his flesh. Love it. Absolutely love it. He is beautifully disturbing, and I'm very, very impressed by him. But I mean, all of the miniatures have their own thing going on. The Noise Marines, very interesting take. They could have gone in so many different directions with the Noise Marines. Unlike the other cult troops, like say take the Khorne Berserkers. If you go to the earliest miniatures that weren't even called Khorne Berserkers back then. They were called Khorne Ravagers or Assault Troops or something like that. And then if you put each miniature that leads up to the Khorne Berserkers and each incarnation of the Khorne Berserkers in a linear line, you can see the evolution. Same with the Plague Marines and the Death Guard. If you go back to the earliest Plague Marine minis and put them side by side right up until 2025, you can see the evolution of them. It's not true for the Noise Marines. They started out as a joke. Obviously, the original Noise Marines are these hair metal, glam rock, very kind of silly ideas. And then they become reimagined as the game goes on. The ones that occur, the original Noise Marines, were almost completely thrown out for second ed, and you had these weird, distorted, wacky things. Go and look at the second ed Noise Marines. There's only 3 of them, by the way, 3 metal miniatures, and they were weird as hell. I mean, really, really strange. And then that was thrown out as well. That aesthetic was thrown out for the 3.5 Chaos Space Marine Codex Emperor's Children. They went much more down the pleasure pain route then and made them more cenobitic, which really works for them. And then for the longest time, you almost have nothing. You have the Cacophony for Horus Heresy, which incorporates elements of all of them, but that's it. And then nothing for the longest time. This just great whacking gap where there's nothing. And now you've got the new Noise Marines. And the new Noise Marines, they're kind of a strange hybrid of the Cacophony and the Cenobitic Noise Marines. They've got elements of both, and they're really beautiful. I mean, they've done a stunning, stunning job on them, as they have with the entire range. They're mutated in very particular ways, and they have this kind of priestly cast to them, a little bit like the Cenobites do. And that is actually derived from the Black Library novels, because in the Black Library novels involving the Emperor's Children, particularly the Fabius Bile books, the Noise Marines are this cast apart from the main Emperor's Children. Even when they occur in an Emperor's Children force, they don't interact with them in the same way that all the other troops do. They are secluded and isolated apart, and they pursue their own very esoteric agendas, and they're treated with awe and reverence by the other Emperor's Children, because they are, of course, some of the chosen of Slaanesh. That's really interesting. And I like that. I like the fact that they are kind of rare. Unlike, say, the Khorne Berserkers in World Eaters or the Plague Marines in Death Guard, they're rare. That's brilliant. That's absolutely wonderful. It lends them a very particular patina. And there's so much you can do with a kit. So much you can do with these kits. They are very convertible, which is nice. I mean, I'm a converter. I'm a modeler and a hobbyist before I am a player. So for me, this is just Christmas. This is just a Slaaneshmas, right? This is just the best. You can do so much with these guys, and there's so many like aesthetic cues for Slaanesh to make them particular. I mean, my Emperor's Children force. The background is that it's like it's not a single force. It's actually kind of like a polyglot force of various different armies and war bands that have all come together. So they all emphasize different aspects of Slaanesh and different aesthetics. So I'm going buck wild with the conversions. Every unit, every character is unique. Everything is different. And I've been going nuts converting like Lord's Cacophonist from Chaos Space Marine possessed minis, and yeah, it's crazy stuff. Absolutely bonkers crazy stuff. Putting snake bodies from the Daughters of Cain Meliusai onto Noise Marines and Lords Exultant and stuff like crazy stuff. Really properly old school chaos mutated wild weirdness. And I'm really loving it. I must say, this is the most excited I've been about the hobby for a very long time. It's been a good year. It's been a good year for Chaos. I mean, we've had the Emperor's Children release, which I love. Of course, we've just got the World Eaters and the Death Guard. The Death Guard being my second favorite of the Cult Legion. So, yeah, you better believe I'll be diving into that codex when it comes. The World Eaters, wonderful, and the Thousand Sons coming up, who I also love. I also absolutely adore. I'm very, very, very pleased at the moment. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a little bit excited right now. And I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with the Emperor's Children. There are great whacking gaps in the army list, which makes me think that they have plans for something. It makes me think that they have plans for demon engines in these guys and their own bespoke tanks and things like that, which again they're perfectly suited to. Can you imagine kind of Emperor's Children like long range bombardment vehicle that has like a kind of Noise Marine organ on the back or something like that? Of course that's going to happen at some point. I don't know when, but of course that's going to happen at some point. Cannot wait to see it, and I'm very looking forward to seeing what they do with these guys in the future. Okay, well, my loves, next time I think what we're going to do, we're going to look at the World Eaters for 10th ed, because that's going to be very interesting too. Until then, bye bye.